Probably 15, 20 years. We got to know each other through Haverford College Global Dialogue Group run by Ashok Gangadine. For many years, I think he's still doing it. He hosts wonderful conferences there and brings in forefront thinkers and speakers. And Annabella and I were on many committees there. So we got to know each other and adore each other during that period of time. And we don't get to see each other very much. But I recently found out about some of her studies and things she was doing about a year ago. And I asked her if she would come and present on this topic of her experiences and trip to Egypt, and she said yes, that she would. So I like to introduce Annabella as a Renaissance woman, because when you hear some of her background, you'll probably agree. At 18, she enlisted in the Air Force and was an aircraft mechanic and served in the military for about 2 years. At 20, she became a career truck driver and eventually founded her own business. 15 out of her 33-year career as a truck driver, her specialty was hauling gasoline and other explosives all around the U.S. and Canada. If we have time, she'll tell you about her deliveries to Area 51. Interesting. She was awarded a Fulbright scholarship at 45 and decided to go back to college. And so she went to Bryn Mawr College studying the nature of thought. And basically, she enrolled as a freshman in the physics department. After 3 years there, she kind of refined her educational directional endeavors, and she earned a BA in Holistic Studies, Spirituality, and Religion from Union Institute and University. Her minor was in metaphysics and quantum physics. She continued post-studies at the Resonance, Science Foundation Academy, where she studied unified physics theory, which is led and run by Nassim Haramein. Some of you follow his work and know him. She's an award-winning singer and songwriter, acknowledged by the Independent Musicians Association for her famous song, Truck Driving Mama. And she has released 7 fantastic music CDs. She is also an ordained interfaith minister with the Circle of Miracles and sits on the board of the Twilight Wish Foundation. Currently, Annabella runs her own independent contracting business, which is acknowledged by Angie's national list of best contractors in the year 2011. So and she's gotten many customer service awards for them as well. She lives in the Blue Belt area, and in her spare time, she's now started to research perpetual energy machines and is currently studying electrogravitic sciences. I don't think Russell's in the audience as yet, but many of you know we've had Russell Anderson's present on this topic. One of her wish dream lists is to partake in interstellar space flight. That would be really wonderful. A year ago, Annabella traveled to the Great Pyramids of the Giza Plateau in Cairo with a group of 160 graduates from the Renaissance Science Foundation.
Resonance
Science Foundation. There, that group of 160 people spent the night in all 3 pyramids. They divided up in groups and they were there, specifically doing an experiment, activating potential, maybe a hidden potential energy system that they suspected might be possible through voice. So they were activating vibratory frequencies through their own chanting. They literally attempted, and as you will hear, succeeded in rocking the pyramids. Tomorrow, she leaves for Cusco, Peru, with this same 160 group people from this group that she studies with, and they will be doing similar experiments in Cusco, Peru. So she cannot come to dinner with us. So if you have questions, you're going to have to ask her now. So it's with great pleasure I invite you to please give a warm welcome to Annabella Bush.
Now you get to rock mainline MUFON. All right,
We're going to turn down the lights a little bit and adjust them so people can see your slide.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Welcome to Mainline MUFON. As she already said, I'm Reverend Annabella Wood, a part-time physicist, interfaith minister, and a very curious individual. And so tonight we're going to be talking about my trip to Egypt with a group of Resonance Science Foundation graduates. And there is the website address for the Resonance Science Foundation if you're interested in just this new science of the connected universe, and can't recommend this high enough. All right, so let's get started. What if everything in the physical world were made up of nothing but vibrations, frequencies, and electronic force fields? What if solid matter were not solid at all? What if the sound Om was actually the beginning of all creation? What kind of world would we be living in if our thoughts could influence physical reality? And what does it mean to say we are all one? How can that possibly be true when it appears that we're all separated from each other and everything else in the world? And of course, what does any of this have to do with UFOs, pyramids, ancient societies, and megalithic Egyptian structures? Well, to understand how all this connects and why any of it matters at all, let's take a little trip into your bathroom. Let's say you draw a tub full of water. The drain is closed and the water is just sitting there. When you look at the water from the top and just look straight down, it's very hard to see water at all. You can't hear it. The temperature, if it's close to the temperature of your finger and you put your fingers into the water, you'll hardly even feel it. For all intents and purposes, your senses do not react to the water. Now, you take your rubber ducky and you put him in the tub. No matter where you put him in that tub, he just sits there. He doesn't go anywhere. Now, pull the plug on the tub, and all of a sudden, your senses are alerted. You can hear it as the water runs out of the tub. You can see the water as it swirls at the drain. If you put your finger into the moving water, you will actually feel the water hit your skin. The moving water is noticeable through your senses, as the still water was not. If the ducky is at the end of the tub that wasn't moving, it still won't move very much. It won't be very affected by the water going down the drain until it moves a little closer. The closer it gets to that vortex, the more quickly it approaches the vortex, until at some point it just sits right on top of it and just spins around and around and around, and it will not leave the top of that vortex. It never shoots off of there. The properties of the water have actually changed based on the fact that many individual particles of it are moving coherently. The water in the vortex is still just water. Sure, it's still water, nothing but water. It just has different properties than the water did when it was standing still. Now, a bigger example of this is surfing. Have you ever been out there on the ocean waiting for a wave to surf? As you're out there just sort of paddling around, it's highly unlikely that the water is going to hurt you. You could drown in it, but probably the water lapping up on your knees or whatever as you're sitting on your surfboard is not going to cause you any pain. The water feels soft and it caresses you as you sit there. And then comes the wave. You see the swell and start swimming to catch it. Well, let's put it this way. You can have a great ride. And humans aren't the only ones that like to do that. But you can also get hurt. That nice, soft water can break your bones. This was a national champion body surfer who died about 3 seconds after that shot was taken, simply by the force of the water molecules. This motion, caused by coherent movement of water molecules, is called force. It's energy. That is energy. The movement itself is what creates the new physical properties of the same old stuff. We can see this in light also. Lasers are collections of photons all moving together and doing things regular light cannot do. A laser beam is coherent light, and it can cut through steel. Now, space-time is made up of little tiny things called Plancks. They can be compared to the water molecules in the water analogy. We can't feel Plancks at all. They're way too small. In places where there's no material, such as in between you and me right now, or in between the molecules, or even in between the nucleus and the electron in an atom, even that is stuffed with Plancks. And Plancks are not material things yet. They're just little oscillators. They just sit there and vibrate, a lot like the water molecules in the tub that was sitting still. The molecules are just sitting there vibrating. They're not doing anything but vibrating in place. But when something moves through the medium, the Plancks spin together and form vortexes, just like some of the water that's struck by this boat. The movement through the medium of space-time, that can be done with sound, light, or even with your thought. That's a pretty cool idea. Once the Plancks start spinning into a vortex, this is where our senses take notice. The spinning Plancks form a proton. That's what a proton is. A proton is space-time Plancks moving in a coherent fashion in a whirlpool, sort of like air molecules in a tornado. Right? When a tornado hits, it sure doesn't act like regular air. Right? It has a whole different set of properties, but it's just air moving in a coherent fashion. Little tiny bits of space-time moving together create enough energy to become the building block of all material things. Just like the ocean wave or the water going down the tub drain, space-time itself takes on new properties that don't represent the rest of itself. Everything that we call material is nothing more than space-time, moving in a unique and specific manner such that it tickles our senses and we can see, taste, feel, hear, and smell it. In fact, we are made out of space-time Plancks moving in a coherent fashion. And that's how we're all one. The wave is still part of the ocean. It's not separate from the ocean, no more than we're separate from space-time and from each other. Nichola Tesla, perhaps, is one of the greatest inventive minds to ever grace this planet. He summed it up very succinctly. If you wish to understand the universe, think of energy, frequency, and vibration. Buckminster Fuller expressed similar ideas with regards to gravity. Buckminster Fuller said, and I quote, "The gravitational field will ultimately be disclosed as ultra-high frequency spheres, nothing else." So now he's talking about gravity. Gravity in our society is considered something that you just can't do anything about. It's just here, it's going to be here, and that's the end of it. Don't even bother messing with it. Well, Buckminster Fuller, I'm going to read this one more time because this is where we are in science today. Gravitational field will ultimately be disclosed as ultra-high frequency spheres and nothing else. This picture shows a rendering of Buckminster Fuller's 64 tetrahedron grid, which he determined to be the most balanced geometry in the world. This shape is the geometry that the Plancks in space-time occupy. So we could say that it's the geometry of the fabric of space-time. It is the only geometry that can hold the Plancks in perfect balance. Now the top half of this picture depicts spheres, while the bottom depicts the same thing in straight lines. The spheres will probably remind some of you of a sacred geometry symbol called the flower of life. The flower of life was known way back in time. This etching of it was found on a pillar in the Egyptian Osiris temple, and it's estimated to be over 10,000 years old. It happens to be etched on a 60-ton block of rock that is standing up on end in the Osiris temple as a pillar. 10,000 years ago, somebody did that. It has since been flooded, it's been covered with sand, it has been dug out, and you can still see the flower of life on this pillar. It's absolutely amazing. We don't even know how they got it in there. I say etched, we don't know that it's etched. We don't know what technology they used to put that thing in there. Is it just chance that the ancients drew the two-dimensional rendering of the geometry of space-time? Could this be a coincidence? Or could the ancient architects of Egypt understood the vibrational, energetic nature of the material world? If so, they would also have the key to gravitational control. It's my prediction that the scientist who believes that protons and electrons are particles, as opposed to movements in space-time, will soon be regarded similarly to scientists who believe that the Earth is flat. The particle model has been very helpful, and we've learned a lot by using it. It has served us well, and we will continue to use it in our everyday experiences, just the way we use the flat Earth model in our everyday lives. As we walk around and drive and sit on the couch, it really does not get in our calculations that the Earth is actually round. But if you're sailing across the ocean, it becomes very important indeed. It's important to those guys on that ship that they know that the Earth is round. So likewise, if you want to fly across outer space, it's important to know the true nature of the fabric of space-time, gravity, your spaceship, and the relationship of these items. There's plenty of evidence that ancient Egyptians witnessed spacecraft. This is one of many hieroglyphs depicting a saucer craft. This is an ancient Egyptian hieroglyph. One can assume that if someone is arriving on a spacecraft, they have accurate knowledge about gravity. That seems rather obvious to me, and how to use it to their advantage. So it's not a big stretch from this thought to be able to understand that the three Great Pyramids and some of the other structures around the Giza Plateau are probably the work of someone whose technology controls gravity, among other things. This picture of the Sphinx was taken by a friend of mine in the group. He put together a course on ancient Egypt available at the Resonance Academy online. This view was shot through an archway in the Valley Temple. Just look at the size of those rocks. Each of the rocks on creating that arch is a single block of stone. The Sphinx itself is actually a single stone carving. It's like Mount Rushmore. Rock was removed from around it, leaving the statue. This in itself isn't so unusual, except that the artist removed the rock in 40 to 60 ton blocks. Then, when they got the rocks far enough away from the statue, they didn't just put them on the Giza Plateau just anywhere. No, they stacked them. They stacked some of these 60-ton rocks. The one right here, this particular rock, has actually been estimated at over 100 tons. That's one rock from that crack right there, all the way to past where the picture ends. This is Nassim Haramein. You can see how tall these rocks are. They're about 5 feet tall, and they're about 5 feet deep, and they're tremendous. This is another rock from here all the way to that side.
So this makes up the plateau that the pyramids are sat on. Just wanted to clarify that for people.
Yes, the Sphinx is right next to the pyramids, and it's all in what's called the Giza Plateau. These are more rocks that have been less exposed to weather. This is inside what's called the Valley Temple. And this particular type of architecture you can see at various different places in the world, including where I'm going tomorrow, and that's Machu Picchu. And really every continent has this type of architecture on it. It's called megalithic architecture. You can tell that these were built by people who had very similar technologies. But no mortar was used putting these rocks into this wall and setting it. And they're still standing. The very minimum that they've been there is 5,500 years, even by conventional scientific standards. But going back to these rocks, which were put up at around the same time, you can see out in the weather, this is huge erosion. And so I don't think you can do that kind of erosion in 5,500 years, but
Can you go back to that picture you just had up?
Yeah, well-
I'll just point out something. There's also an encasement wall behind the Sphinx that was probably where they dug out, and that has eroded much worse than this. So you can see this has been under the sand,
Right.
buried, and this was only recently exposed, maybe for 1,000 years. And you don't see the water erosion that you see around the Sphinx.
that is all correct. I know someone else has been to Egypt.
Yeah.
Now this is a picture of two rocks. This is two rocks inside the Valley Temple, one on top of the other. This is rose granite stone, which is what most of the Valley Temple was put together with. The indentation in the middle is where the crack was when they put these rocks on top of each other. Over time, the stone has grown into one solid piece. I don't think that happens in 5,500 years either. So I think we're talking about something much, much older. And many of the scientists that were on the tour with us are guessing all the way up to 80,000 years old, judging by the erosion on those rocks. If you keep in mind, we are in the middle of a desert, and that is water erosion. So it takes a long, long time. Yeah, okay, so here we are back to these rocks with the massive erosion up here. As Jennifer was saying, this was all buried in sand until it got dug out, these bottom two rows. The stones are estimated to weigh at least 60 tons each. The rocks, these are the rocks that the artists dug out from around the Sphinx. Why would they work with anything this size if not because their technology made it the most efficient way to do things? This would require gravity control. Looking at the top rows of rock, you can see the major erosion. These stones had to have been placed here anywhere from 10 up to 80,000 years ago. Now, looking at all of these things, this is the Giza, this is the Great Pyramid behind right here. These are the pyramid rocks. And we had been walking around the pyramids and things on the outside for a couple of days, and I was still able to intellectualize it and sort of go, yeah, that's pretty cool, but I hadn't gotten my mind blown yet. Until we went to what's called Saqqara. Now this is the step pyramid of Dozier at Saqqara. Outside the step pyramid, there are a couple of shafts like this one and a few others. It's called the burial shaft, though I don't know if any bodies were ever found in it. And I had sort of gotten used to the ideas of the ancients being able to lift heavy objects, but the shafts got next to me because it said that they took a rock the size of the shaft and made it extremely heavy by using gravity control. They made the rock so heavy that it sank into the ground in one piece, thereby creating those shafts. So that sort of messed my brain up. I had the gravity control going this way, but then when they made them heavy and they sank 200 feet into the desert floor where you've got the pyramid, which by the way weighs 600 million, I don't know, it's a lot. It's a lot. The numbers are so big that even if I had the right numbers, my mind doesn't really know what that means when we're talking about the pyramids. So anyway, now we go into the Serapeum. These are tunnels under that step pyramid that I just showed you. Okay, so these guys built a pyramid. They then dug under it and built these tunnels that go for a very long way. These are not short tunnels. They're very deep, they're very tall. And over here, you see the poles off to the left. There is a room off right there. There's a room over here where these dark spots are. There are rooms in there. And inside the rooms are granite boxes. All right? The granite boxes, each box, right there, the box part, by itself, weighs 100 tons. This is the box top. This particular one is dusty, but they're all polished very smooth. but the box top weighs 50 tons. They're all offset from the box like this one. They have 14 rooms, 14 boxes, 14 tops, and they're all highly polished and smooth. On the inside, this is in between the wall of the box and the top, and it's a perfect square, perfect square. They are polished. He's got his hand on the bottom of the box top. He's standing inside the granite box. Now, these are granite. These are really, really, really hard stones. This is not sandstone that we're talking about here. So here's what we have. We have hundreds of feet of underground, under pyramid tunnels with right-angled turns. I forgot to mention there were branches in the tunnels and all of this to get to all the 14 rooms. It just blew my mind. So the ancients brought in the boxes, took them down these tunnels. They weighed 100 tons apiece, and then gently laid them down on the floor of the room for the box, which is about 8 feet lower than the level of the tunnel floor. Now, certainly they didn't use a crane for this. There's no overhead room to bring a crane in. They didn't have any lighting. The only lighting in these tunnels was put in since their time. There were no shafts through the ceiling or anything like that to let in air or light. It's just absolutely mind-blowing. And the boxes are over 6 feet tall in themselves. But most curiously of all, not all 14 boxes were in their rooms. One room was empty. One box and one box top were still in the hallway, in the tunnel. Now, what happened here, it was sort of like the workers, thousands or tens of thousands of years ago, left for lunch and never came back to finish. The authorities have tried, to no avail, to move the box or the box top. We're standing there, that's a box top. So you can see how tall those box tops are. And they just sit right there in the tunnel. Notice that the box top in the picture is not polished yet. It's in the rough. It's in the rough. It's about 40 feet into the tunnel, and it's in the rough. So they brought the boxes and the box tops into the tunnel in the rough, and then they ground them. They ground them inside the tunnels where there was no light and no ventilation. When I was there, I put my hands on this unfinished piece of work, and I realized that I don't know anything about the physical world, except that what we now consider impossible is possible. But it will take a complete overhaul of our picture of the material world to reach this level of technical sophistication. Stones can be made heavy enough to sink 200 feet into the ground. 100-ton boxes can be brought through underground tunnels and gently placed into rooms 6 to 8 feet lower than the floor of the tunnel. And granite can be ground to a polished finish without respiratory gear nor light as we know it. All right, so that brings us to the Great Pyramid. We're going to do a few numbers here. The Great Pyramid is made out of 2,350,000 individual stones, ranging from 2 to 40 tons apiece. Most of the stones are limestone and were quarried nearby. Some of the stones, the granite ones, were quarried nearly 500 miles away. All right. So the story goes that Pharaoh Khufu decided one day that he wanted a really fancy burial plot. So since it was peacetime, don't forget the peacetime part. I just heard this story again from a scientist who was completely convinced it's true about 3 weeks ago, so I'm all polished up on it. So since it was peacetime, he had extra resources and decided he was going to build a pyramid to honor himself in his death. So he decided he was going to get the rocks from 500 miles away, build them 20 to 40 tons apiece, and he was going to use his slaves to pull them with vine ropes and carve them with copper chisels, and they're granite, with copper chisels to a fine edge where they're so well constructed that they don't even need mortar, and they're still standing 5,500 years later. I just don't think so. So in the mine, 500 miles away from the pyramid, the granite in that quarry is about 80 feet below ground level. So when they cut these blocks, they had to cut them in the ground, lift them up, and then carry them over mountains, rivers, and mostly sand to get them to Khufu's pyramid. All right, just imagine doing that with one 2-ton block. Right? Really? Every one of the 2,350,000 stones are differently shaped from all the rest. No two stones are shaped the same. Now, according to Nassim, this is one of the reasons that this building still stands. Because every stone has a different size and shape, it responds resonantly with different vibrations. And so therefore, in order to find a vibration that would bring this building down, it would have to match all of the 2,350,000 stones' vibrations. And therefore, it hasn't done it yet. Chances are pretty good that it won't. And that's one reason our little brick buildings and stone buildings and things do come down really rather quickly, because they're so mono-built. So originally, these stones were covered with a smooth white limestone sheathing, which reportedly was covered with hieroglyphs. The hieroglyphs told the entire story of the origin and purpose of the pyramids. So why don't we know it? Well, that's because the sheathing was quarried by some enterprising Egyptians and used to build nearby cities in or around, right around the 14th century, and it's not getting put back together again. This is about all that's left of the sheathing on the Great Pyramid. You can see how smooth it is. It's all limestone. There are hieroglyphs on this particular stone. Also in the middle pyramid, the one that looks sort of like a shaggy dog, it has that top on it. That's what's left of the sheathing. That's actually what all 3 pyramids were covered with. And it is said that that also told the story of the pyramids, so I really lament that. I wish we had that. Okay, interesting tidbits about the Great Pyramid. One is it lies at the exact center of all of the Earth's landmass. I don't think Khufu would care about doing that. I don't think he would even know how to do that. I wouldn't. Yeah, right. All right, so another interesting thing, if you were to walk along the longest line that one can walk without going over an ocean on Earth, you would pass right by the pyramid. The pyramid cuts that line, not just anywhere on the line, but it cuts it right at phi, which is the golden ratio, which is what it is the basic building block structure of all of the material world. This is my favorite. The sketch of the inside structure of the pyramid overlays perfectly with the human brain and throat. The subterranean chamber lands right on the carotid arteries, the queen's chamber on the pituitary gland, and the king's chamber on the pineal gland. The rainbow part right here, that's the grand gallery, and it's the straight line from the sinus cavities right straight to the pineal gland. The coincidences of the Great Pyramid go on, and we don't have nearly enough time to explore them with any kind of seriousness. There are endless resources on the incredible aspects of this massive structure. For Khufu to have built this, it's just, he would have had to lay a stone. We did the math on this. We had a great time with this. He would have had to lay a stone every 5 minutes, one stone every 5 minutes during the daytime, every day, 365 days a year for 23 years. He only ruled for 22. I don't think he did it. All right. Of all the things we do not know about the pyramid, one thing we can be sure of, and that's that Khufu did not build this. In light of the material world being made of vibration and energy, the pyramid becomes even more interesting. Up in this top corner is a picture from the air. And you can just barely make out indentations on the sides in the middle of each of the 4 sides of the pyramid. You cannot see these from the ground at all whatsoever. It's only from the air. Using these lines as additional points on the base of the pyramid, if you were to draw lines connecting all of the points on the base of the pyramid to every other point on the base of the pyramid, which is where we are right here, you would end up with a 2-dimensional representation of the 64 tetrahedron grid, which is the fundamental shape of space-time. Whoa. The steep ramp leading from the small entrance tunnel of the pyramid up to the king's chamber is known as the Grand Gallery. It's very large and extremely tall, and the walls come closer together in discrete increments as you get higher up toward the ceiling. Sort of hard to see in the picture, but there's an increment, there's an increment, there's an increment. And you can see them. Here's one further up, further up, further up. It just so happens that the discrete steps on the walls are perfectly shaped and sized to sound harmonic notes in our musical scale in 4-part harmony, including the octave. I spent much of my time inside the pyramid, sitting in the Grand Gallery, taking in the beautiful sound within, without knowing that this fact was true. When we were visiting, the Queen's chamber was full of a muon detecting machine, and its presence in the Queen's chamber kept me from being able to connect with the vibes in any meaningful way in that room. This picture is of the King's chamber. These are some of the largest rocks in the pyramid. They're all granite. Granite has a large quartz component, which is a crystal. Notice the tight lines between the stones, the exquisite masonry work. On the right, this guy on the right, that's just a dehumidifier in there. It has nothing to do with the ancients. The stone box at the front is known as the sarcophagus. Okay. Though no mummy nor body of any kind has ever been found in any of the big pyramids. These are not tombs. Our group referred to the box as a resonator. Strangely enough, the Ark of the Covenant of God, as described in the Old Testament, would fit perfectly into the resonator in the King's chamber. I have a sneaking suspicion that picture is photoshopped. So we'll move on. Above the King's chamber are voids created by horizontal beams made of granite. According to Kathy J. Fort in her book Fractals of the Gods, these beams are embedded with hundreds of tons of silicone quartz crystals. Quartz is a material that creates electricity when it is stressed or put under pressure. Can you imagine the pressure that these rocks are under? More from the Fractals of God. Quote, when the sarcophagus was struck, the whole chamber resonated with 438 hertz frequency, or the perfect natural note of A. The chamber has been tuned to that specific frequency, and the quartz crystal in the walls played its role in the resonance. End quote. In a world of vibration and energy, crystals do play a big role. Our society uses them in many ways, in the electronic and computer fields, as well as many, many others. Everyone in our group received an ARC crystal. ARK stands for Advanced Resonance Kinetic Crystal. I brought mine with me here. This is a hand-grown crystal which enhances the coherent movement of Planck's, as well as structures water molecules back to their pure H2O form. It significantly enhances resonance between space-time Plancks, water, and the body. You can get those online at artcrystal.com. They are made through the Resonance Science Foundation. And here we are. The Egypt trip was the Resonance Science Foundation's first field trip. And it was the first time that these crystals were available en masse. These are all art crystals here. It's the crystal in the last picture with a frame around it. And inside that frame, the crystal is held in silicone bumpers so that the crystal can continue vibrating at all times. You can hold it without slowing down its vibration. Additionally, there were small magnets that were put into those frames so that the crystals will hold together like this. This is a magnetic structure right there. And that is 64 art crystals because it makes a 64 tetrahedral grid. All right, so the energy coming off of each crystal is palpable to energy-sensitive people. But just about anyone can feel it when you put a bunch of these crystals together. This is the picture of the first assembly of a 64 tetrahedral grid with art crystals. And I placed one of those crystals. I'm so special. But that was hot. When we got those 64 crystals together, heat generated in that, and it just pushed out. So before leaving for Egypt, we all got together on a phone call. There were about 160 of us, staff and students of Unified Physics. We set our intentions that day. What stood out for me was our intention to contact the ancient architects of the pyramids to say thank you for sending such a lasting message of hope through time in the form of the massive stone structures. While in Egypt, we spent about 3 hours per day gathered in class at the hotel, and the rest of the time we were out on the plateau or varying sites nearby, seeing the sights and feeling and touching the amazing structures. We were near the end of our trip when the day of the full moon finally arrived. It was October 5th, 2017. We had a very light day of classwork and free time. The 160 of us that were in Egypt were accompanied by hundreds more back home who were energetically holding the space for our successful reconnection with the ancient architects on this night. Nassim had been granted permission. I took that picture and it's taken me back. Right? You can see the pyramid. This is the pyramid right here. And this is the full moon. It was bright enough we didn't need to use any flashlights or anything. We could just walk around on the plateau. It was gorgeous. Nassim had been granted permission from the Egyptian government for our group to occupy all 3 pyramids simultaneously. This in itself made it an unusual event. We were split into 4 groups of about 40 people each. The plan was for the first group to go to the Great Pyramid, meditate and chant Om for 2 hours. Then the second group would arrive at the Great Pyramid, and the first group moved to the second pyramid. Then the third group would arrive after 2 hours at the Great Pyramid, and the other 2 would move on to the next pyramids. 2 hours later, the fourth group would arrive, and the first group would go back to the hotel, having meditated and chanted Om inside the pyramids for 6 hours. This way, we were able to keep the pyramids vibrating for 12 hours straight. The first group's purpose was to open the space and announce our arrival to our cosmic cousins. The second group was to build upon the energy vibration. Third group to reach a pinnacle, and fourth group to close the ceremony. One person in the first group had difficulty walking to such a degree that her movement within the pyramids proved impossible. She had to remain outside and witnessed what happened through the vibratory field on the outside of the pyramids. And all of us are so grateful that she was there. There really are no mistakes. Group members moved about the pyramid, finding their own favorite spots, chambers or alcoves, and experienced the magnificent structures in their own ways. I was in group 3. Groups 1 and 2 had been chanting in the Great Pyramid for 4 hours by the time I got there. The stones felt alive. Upon entering the Great Pyramid, I teared up. I don't know why. I looked all around and just took it in. I felt so honored to be inside the great structure. I have since heard from others that they experienced the same swell of emotion. As we entered the pyramid, I could hear the ohms emanating from the king's chamber, where Nassim personally chanted Om for 12 hours this night. He was there longer than any of the rest of us. I headed straight up to the king's chamber. I didn't know what to expect, but I knew that was where I wanted to go. I climbed for what seemed like about 10 minutes, though I have no way of knowing if that's accurate. My leg muscles were burning when I finally stepped over the tall sill into the small room. There were only a few people inside. Most of our group had gone off to other chambers. There was one person off to the left and 3 gathered at the resonator. At the head of the resonator stood Nassim. At the foot was his assistant Teresa. Both wore white and looked like ethereal angels in the dim light. Each member of the group was given an opportunity to take a few minutes to lie in the resonator. A stack of 64 arc crystals was placed at their head, blowing energy into their bodies through the crown chakra, while Nassim and his assistant chanted along with everyone else in the room. It was awesome. Everyone chanted in unison, except perhaps for the person in the resonator. The ohms start low in the chest and then built, rising into the lungs, hitting a crescendo with involvement of the diaphragm, chest, lungs, throat, and facial bones. Then fading down to a hum, and then to silence. A deep in-breath, and then it started over again, and again, and again. I walked straight up to the resonator and sent some Reiki to the person inside as we chanted. When they were done, I took my turn. From inside, the vibrations of the stone walls were palpable as the sides of the rock box reverberated and the chanting echoed. I felt the power from the crystals light up my spine. The vibrations of the chanting entered my body. It became alive, or it disappeared and got lost. It felt as if the atoms would all fly apart, like they were moving so fast they would overcome the gravity holding them together. Or maybe the vibrations of the universe were merging with my own and loosening up the gravity itself. It felt like I imagined it would feel in the transporter room on the Starship Enterprise and being beamed somewhere. I felt more alive, possibly merging into all of the existence as the rigidity of my own atoms defining my body dissolved. Then they merged back together as I remembered who and where I was, and I was afraid that I would lose that. And then I just threw caution to the wind, deciding to allow everything to dissolve again as I merged into the present moment. I don't know how much time passed. After a while in this ecstatic dance of merging and defining and then merging and defining and merging again with the universal vibration, all that is, Nassim leaned in and touched me on the shoulder. I momentarily had the wild idea that I might not be able to get all my protons back into the box. But they did come back together into that old familiar feeling of physical existence. Upon leaving the resonator, I noticed the air in the room was very, very hot. Or maybe it was just me. My body was sweating, but I was not uncomfortable. It was not stuffy at all. I found a place to lie down and noticed that the rocks on the floor and walls of the chamber were pleasingly cool to the touch. They felt smooth on my skin, unlike the rocks in the tunnels. I closed my eyes and began chanting and joined all of creation one more time. One by one, everybody in the group had time in the resonator as the chanting continued. After a while, I left the king's chamber and visited the queen's chamber. There was a big metallic machine in there, large enough that it took up at least a quarter of the room from some university doing research. I couldn't get a feel for the place and left after just a minute or two. I came to rest at the base of the steps leading back up to the king's chamber. Sitting on a ledge under the tall step-sloped ceiling of the grand gallery, I leaned against the wall behind me and listened to the vibrations of the structure. The whole building was oming. Even when the group let the sound fall between ohms, the rocks themselves vibrated with the ohm. It was literally coming from the stones which make up the Great Pyramid. It was a very, very low, deep note, and it never came or left. It was just going all the time at this point. A line from a song in Jesus Christ Superstar came to mind. Why waste your breath moaning at the crowd? Jesus is talking to Caiaphas. Nothing can be done to stop the shouting. If every tongue were still, the noise would still continue. The rocks and stones themselves would start to sing. I realized this was not a metaphor from Jesus. This was literally the truth. The rocks and stones themselves sing with the great sound of creation. I stayed in this place, sometimes listening, sometimes chanting, sometimes merging, and sometimes emerging again, until I felt people start leaving the pyramid. Our 2 hours in the Great Pyramid were done, and we were moving on to the second pyramid. I noticed as I left that the Egyptian guards at the door were saying something to us as we passed by. It was not goodbye or good night as I expected. They were saying, thank you, thank you, thank you. I thanked them back, feeling gratitude to everyone and everything that had anything to do with my being there with this group to experience what I experienced in that pyramid. At the time, part of me thought that the Egyptians were simply using the wrong phrase for whatever it was they were trying to say, probably like good night or something. I was slightly aware that I didn't know what had happened while we were in there. Maybe they really were thanking us. But not feeling very attached to the earth at that moment anyway, I didn't think a whole lot about it. But I could feel that something somewhere had shifted. We were in the pyramid from 8 to 10 that night. The other two pyramids offered wonderful experiences, though not as surprising nor nearly as intense. After 6 hours of chanting and feeling more ethereal than physical, I was ready to head back to the hotel when we emerged from the third pyramid at 2 a.m. My physicality crashed in on me and let me know it needed some sleep. Late the next morning, our group reassembled at the hotel to discuss what we had experienced while inside the pyramids. I did not share, as I felt my experience was probably pretty much average. The following accounts were shared with the group. And mainly this is from the lady who was stuck outside that had wanted to come into the pyramid. In the beginning of the night, left outside of the Great Pyramid, our member who couldn't go inside with the group felt a little left out. What was she doing there anyway? Why did she even make the effort to come on a trip when she knew she wouldn't be able to go inside the pyramids? Her mind was churning. Then she noticed her thoughts and guided them to a different space. What a privilege it was to be with this group, to be able to sit alone without all the tourists and merchants around, just with this magnificent structure in the middle of the Giza Plateau, which had probably been sitting there for 13, 25, 50,000 years or more. What kind of magnificence could have withstood the Great Flood, the annual floods of the Nile, and all the havoc earthly life can wreak on a building? Not only did it get no maintenance during this time, but people have actually been destructive to it. And yet it still stands tall, proud, mysterious, knowing more of life than any of us will ever figure out. After about an hour, she asked the Great Pyramid, "What message would you like me to deliver?" The response was immediate. "Thank you for coming back. What took you so long? Thank you." She said that if a pyramid could cry, this one would be bawling with joy. She felt such warmth, gratitude, and joy from this rock structure that she closed her eyes and sat with it in silence. And then she heard it. She heard the alms emanating from within the pyramid. Now, mind you, this is a solid rock building, solid rock, with a couple of little holes carved in it that we call chambers. But other than the chambers, it is solid rock. Was she imagining this? No, there it was again. Steady as a heartbeat, coming straight through the solid rock structure. Yes, she thought, her eyes still closed. We are back. She stayed with the moment and then opened her eyes. She saw blue lights emanating from the top half of the pyramid, around where the king's chamber was. She rubbed her eyes, thinking it was probably some mirage from opening them or from her imagination. Then looking again, there could be no doubt. Blue lights were coming out of the pyramid walls. She teared up with emotion. Even the guards were looking askance at the pyramid. At around the same time in the king's chamber, Nassim felt a change in the room. As he describes it, "I felt the structure start to breathe again." Near the end of the 2 hours with the first group in the Great Pyramid, the blue lights turned to white and became a grand display of joy and gratitude. What a sight! The Great Pyramid stretching to the sky, white lights pouring forth from the top half of the walls, with the full moon in the background. The first 2 hours passed. The first group moved to the second pyramid, and the second group arrived at the Great Pyramid. The heartbeat of the pyramids continued, this time emanating from the first 2 structures. 80 voices chanting in unison. The rocks themselves reverberating life's universal song. The first group opened the heart of the second pyramid. They brought with them another 64 crystal array and set it up in the main chamber of the pyramid. There was a resonator in this room, and everyone took their time in this one too. Still, the chanting continued. The primordial vibration of life, on and on with every breath. Every person took their turn in the resonator, each one contributing to the vibratory communication with the universe. Meanwhile, the second group built upon the vibration in the Great Pyramid. The second 2 hours passed, and the third group arrived to the Great Pyramid, while the other 2 moved to the next pyramids in line. The full moon brightly lit the night sky, lighting the way for the people as they moved quietly and reverently amid the reverberating buildings. During the interim in the king's chamber, Nassim and his assistant continued beating the heart and breathing the lungs of this great structure. The first group set up a third 64 crystal array in a much smaller room in the third pyramid, settled in and resumed chanting. The second group did the same in the second pyramid, and the third in the first pyramid. Time passed, clouds passed. Our witness was now outside the third pyramid. Suddenly, she felt the third pyramid energize. This was different than the lights she saw at the Great Pyramid. This time, she saw a line of energy run from the third pyramid to the second pyramid, which clicked on. Then the line ran to the Great Pyramid, which also clicked on. It was as if the pyramids just connected themselves together as one great big energizing device. They worked together as a unit, not as separate entities. Now they were back online, joined together again for the first time in a very, very long time. This took place at about 9 o'clock in the evening. It was 1 hour into having all 3 pyramids occupied and vibrating with the Om. It was after I had visited the Queen's chamber. It was when I was hearing the rocks and stones begin to sing. At the end of the night, as the fourth group was finishing up its closing meditation in the third pyramid, the night nearly over, A few of the group were outside, taking in the moon, the stars, and the beauty of the experience. The pyramids had been vibrating to Om for over 12 consecutive hours. Lying on their backs, these members were taking in the power of this newly energized space. And then they saw something. Stars in the sky, moving. No, not stars after all, but lights moving in the sky, brighter and nearer than stars. Lots of them, maybe 50 lights or more, getting closer to the earth, moving together in the sky. They started from far away, came to the area above the pyramids, where they were at their nearest to the ground, though still way up in the sky. They moved as a group. They paused above the pyramids for a moment, maybe longer, maybe minutes, and then whoosh, they quickly disappeared. The witnesses independently received the same message very clearly, though in different words. These were some of the words that I heard to describe what they had received. We hear you. We are glad to see you. Thank you. We are here to help you, and we will be back. As for myself, the chanting continued the next day. So here we're in a bowl kind of thing, and there's a row of like 5 or 6 of these. Each of these bowls is perfectly acoustically tuned. And when you sit in there and you put your head in a certain spot and you chant the Om, or whatever you chant, it just covers the entire area. And we had people that had little hand instruments and they would play them, and the sound went out all over the place. So it was a lot of fun. I stayed in there a long time. So as for myself, I now see the world very differently. I see matter as simply waves and vortexes of space-time, stretching, limitless, sometimes going all the way to infinity. In this world, there can be no separation. There can be no lack, only the appearances of such things. This is the second pyramid, there's the limestone sheathing at the top. As for myself, if my trip to the pyramids has taught me anything, it is that we live in a loving, living, connected universe, powered by something that we don't yet understand. We are not alone on this planet, in this solar system, nor in this universe. Our interplanetary cousins want to help us become full universal citizens. Only our fear of them is keeping them out of our view. As we search for a more compelling storyline of who we are, why we are here, and what our true history contains, new stories emerge, giving rise to descriptions of a world in which no problem is insurmountable, no race nor religion need dominate. We will be able to live on the earth without leaving any footprint at all. And we will be able to travel through space-time at will. For more information on any of these topics, go to the websites listed here. Feel free to take a picture of this screen if you have interest. You can Google unified physics. You can research, you can experiment, try new thoughts. Get busy. The more of us who join the coherent consciousness, the sooner we will make marked changes in our society, and we will loosen our perceived human limits. I invite all open-minded, intelligent skeptics to reconsider the implausible, impossible stories that we have been told. I'm talking about the story of slaves building pyramids, the story that everything on earth is separated and not working together, and the story that we are all alone in the universe. Ask questions, find answers, and spend time creating possibilities. Just as coherent motion of Planck's creates something completely new, our coherent motion of consciousness will create a brand new tomorrow. Thank you. Yes, well, I didn't see this actually take place. But what happened was when we got home, nobody saw this in person. But when we got home, this started showing up on cameras. Now, certainly the argument can be made this is photoshopped. I don't know, I didn't make it. But it started coming from a number of people that were in our group. So perhaps they did get together, whatever you want to believe. I choose to believe that we had other energies with us in those pyramids. That's my choice. And that's how I choose to see this picture. But it's certainly up to you. I will not argue if you want to think it's photoshopped. Yes?
Early on, you were using the word plots?
Planck, P-L-A-N-K. And it's from Max Planck, the German guy that discovered them. So it's pronounced Planck, but it's spelled like plank.
But what are they?
Planck is, Max Planck was working for General Electric looking for a better light bulb. And so he was studying the filament of the light bulbs of that day, and he noticed that he could make them brighter or dimmer, but only in particular increments of brighter or dimmer. And that increment is called the Planck's length. It winds up that there was a lot more to it that he didn't get to the bottom of, but he was the one that started it, and they are called Planck's. And the reason the light bulb does that is because of the electrons, the orbitals and all of these other things. Very complicated process. But
Between the electrons, as they jump from one space?
they jump from one shell to the next, yeah, that's a Planck. But it's made completely from space-time, because that's where the Plancks are. So, yes?
Would you describe the resonator again?
The resonator is known as the sarcophagus. Most people have heard of the sarcophagus in the King's Chamber. But a sarcophagus sounds rather morbid to me. And this thing has nothing to do with dying. It's all about living. So we all called it the resonator. But it's the sarcophagus.
The bowl that we saw your feet sticking out of, were they all tuned at the same frequency, or were they tuned at different frequencies at different bowls?
It was the way that they were acoustically set up. The acoustics were amazing. They were all pretty much the same. They weren't tuned to a note or anything, but when you made a sound from inside the bowl, it always went to this particular spot. So if you could get your ear to that spot.
Has anyone measured that to know what that frequency?
Yeah, there have been all kinds of studies on these bowls. Yeah.
Did you get the sense that the chambers and what you were doing in them, the rituals, the ceremonies, were very familiar to the pyramid, that this is how it was used, or it just felt like really comfortable doing that there?
It felt very, very comfortable doing that.
I'm wondering if they were used for transport, like transporting us beyond.
If you see the world as vibration and frequency, then sound is everything. So these pyramids actually locked themselves together energetically through the use of sound and intention. That's what happened that night. We really got these three pyramids to lock together energetically. In Cairo, 50 miles away, a lab that measures such things reported that there was an electrical anomaly happening on the Giza Plateau. Yeah, so it was real.
And you just added the word intention,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's such an important part.
Yes, yes. I actually think that our thoughts are actually bigger. They're made out of bigger objects, if it's even an object. I mean, this is all very nebulous ideas. But I think that the thought is more powerful on the Plancks. So Plancks are the building block of everything. They're like the pixel of a material world this size. Right? There are probably bigger material worlds, and there are probably smaller material worlds. We might be the Plancks of some giant world somewhere, right? But where was I going? Something you asked. Intention. intention. I think intention is extremely important. And setting your intention before you do any large endeavor is a wonderful thing. And the universe will pick up your intention even if you're not conscious of it. And that's where we get into a lot of trouble, is when we're not conscious of our intention. That can cause a lot of issues. Hang on one second. Yes?
I'm curious, you said that vibration rides on the tone or musical pattern. Right? So does that mean, I have a couple of questions. Does that mean vibration needs music to exist? And then the other question I have is, I'm sure you've been to the ringing rock, where you hit the stone, and in your exploration of vibration, have you, and there, did you in any way ignite any through, I know you did it through sound, but through percussion in any way, ignite vibration or movement and sound?
Yes. So as far as the relationship between vibration and sound, sound is vibration. That's all it is.
So there's no vibration if there's no sound. So in other words, any wave format. When I think of vibration,
Doesn't mean, you could say yes to that, but our ear doesn't pick up the entire range of frequency.
yes.
So if you're calling sound, sometimes the stuff we do hear and sometimes the stuff we don't, like a dog whistle. There we are, a dog whistle. We don't pick up the dog whistle, but it's still a sound. So if you include all of the sounds that we don't pick up, then I would say yes.
Then you would say yes.
That vibration and sound are the same thing.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, as far as the ringing rocks, we had so much fun there because, I mean, we were all kids, right? And we were playing and exploring, and we had full permission to do this. And we had bands playing on these rocks. They were amazing. They're ringing rocks. And these are rocks that when you hit them with something, it could even be as small as your fingernail. Some of the gals with the really long fingernails were going ting, 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 and these rocks were just making notes, and they're tuned to different notes, and there are different rocks there. And it's just, it's in the Giza Plateau area in Egypt. Is there one in Pennsylvania too? Yeah, there's a whole, I haven't been to the one in Pennsylvania, so I was the one in Egypt.
Have you ever tied any of this in with all the huge amount of Edgar Cayce material on this, where they talk about how the extraterrestrials and Thoth or Hermes helped build the pyramids like 10 or 12,000 years ago?
Yeah, there's an awful lot on it. But here's one of the things I love about unified physics, which to me is the leading science bringing us into a vibrational material world, is that unified physics gives scientific explanation to psychic phenomenon, distant healing, distant visions, all of these things that we haven't had any kind of scientific basis, but we just sort of know it happens. And we've been told to just forget that part of our lives, or we're crazy. Not so. Not crazy at all. And in with the spinning proton, if you don't get this part, don't feel bad. It's okay, I'm going to use a number here. But the number of Plancks that make a single proton, there's a certain number that makes that proton. Any proton, all protons have the same number of Plancks in them. That number is exactly equal to the number of protons in the entire universe, physical world. So what that tells us is that we've got, every proton is in total communication with every other proton in the universe. There is an ambassador from each proton in the universe in every proton. And that explains entanglement, it explains psychic phenomenon, it explains long distance healing. The whole butterfly effect is completely in there.
It's sort of like that thing about a picture has a little piece of it, has everything in it. I can't think what it's called. Hologram.
Yeah, hologram, absolutely. Yeah, it's a completely holographic universe, fractal, Fractals are all in there.
Everything is one.
Yeah, well, it's all space-time. It's all space-time, moving or not moving. Anything material is spinning.
We're all one also.
If it's not spinning, it's not material. And that's because when it's not spinning, it doesn't have that special property.
Yep, there are no secrets. One.
I just wanted to point out that a great deal of information is already out there. For example, in the work of Hermes Trismegistus, the Emerald Tablets.
Oh, yeah.
You are familiar with that.
Yes, I am. Absolutely.
But again, so much has been repressed over a long period of time that, again, not all of this is available in the conscious world, but if you are in tune with it telepathically, you can get it.
Well, and one thing I find very interesting too is like religions have their uses and everything, but when I went back to the Bible having studied this physics, all of a sudden I saw everything differently. In that you really could walk on water, right? That could actually have taken place. If Jesus was aware of this type of world, where he could make himself weightless. They're lifting 100-ton rocks and stacking them 3 high. He could have made himself weightless. Why not? It would have been easy. So all of that, the feeding of the fishes, all he had to do was to get the plank spinning and fishes would appear. So the power of our minds is so amazing at manifesting and creating a physical world that we really want. The issue here is that we don't believe it because we've been taught everything opposite of that. The physical world is more powerful than our minds. And it's just not true. It's absolutely not true. And as more and more of us wake up and realize that if we consciously keep our minds in a good frame, if many of us do this together, the more powerful it's going to be. One has a good effect on I can affect my life pretty profoundly. But if I want to affect other people's lives too, get a group. Start a study group at home. Get more and more people involved. Yes?
I'd like to know what your group intention is for your trip to Peru.
Very similar. Very similar. We want to contact the architects up there in Machu Picchu. We're going to study a lot. And we're going to see if we can rock Machu Picchu. We're going to be staying up on top of Machu Picchu overnight on the full moon. Once again, somehow he got permission to do this. I don't know. I don't ask questions. I'm bringing a lot of suitcases because we need a lot of clothes to stay warm and all of these other things up there. But yes, the intention is the same. And next year, we're going to go to another place and do it again. I would love to have you guys get online, get in through my website, AnnabellaWood.com. I have a physics page right there. Just hit the physics tab and read. I have all kinds of stuff on unified physics. Follow any of those links. They will all take you to this academy online, and you can come and join us. It would be fabulous. The more that we get going on this, the quicker it's going to take place. So. Yes.
I'm curious also about the cyclic patterns you talked about. Have you studied those, and are all the plunk going the same direction, or probably not, but have you studied the patterns of the spinning?
That is really funny that you asked that. That's why I'm sitting here laughing. Because when I was at Bryn Mawr, and I was in their physics program, they kept on wanting me to learn which direction the quark spun. Because the direction of the spinning quark determines what kind of quark it is. And so you have to know the spin on the quark. And I kept asking, what difference does the spin make? Right? I wanted to know so what and who cared about the spin on the quark. They just wanted me to memorize which quark was spinning which direction. Now, what's really interesting about all of that is in this science, there are no quarks. And I asked Nassim that. I said, where is the quark in your model of the proton? Right? Because the quark is something that we're sure that we've discovered now. We've even got the God particle, right? So where are these in your model of the proton? And he described it this way. He said, if you have a car going 100 miles an hour one direction, and you have a car going 100 miles an hour the other direction, and they hit, you're going to get parts flying off in every direction. Now, if some other guy that doesn't know anything about cars is watching this, and he picks up the starter motor, and he goes, oh, the car's made of starter motors. Right? What they call quarks last for 14 milliseconds. And they never actually see one. All they see is the path that it leaves. And what it is it's small groups of Plancks that have been sheared off of the black hole. They've been sheared off of that funnel, that proton. And they're literally breaking up the protons. Now, when they're just doing one a year, it's not going to make much difference. But if you think about the coincidence that there is one Planck in every proton for every proton in the universe, you really don't want to go destroying too many of them. Because you could be messing with the network of the communication system of the entire universe. So I'm not really worried that we're going to destroy enough Plancks to make a big difference in that, but at the same time, I don't think it's a good idea. So the quicker that this science is adapted and understood, like I said, the flat earth thing doesn't make any difference unless you're a sailor, right? And then it makes a big difference. Same thing with the vibrational material world. Doesn't make much of a difference. It does. If you're trying to lift a 100-ton rock, probably be good to know what it's made of.
Speaking of the flat earth, I've read that underneath the pyramid, the Great Pyramid, is absolutely flat. The entire space, that square, is flat to an amazing degree. Now, is that composed, that surface composed of those blocks you were showing?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That was actually built.
So those are completely flat too, under.
Yes, and that's something that no one even talks about, but the rocks that you're walking on when you're looking at these pyramids are tremendous.
That's even as much as significant.
It's like
A first structure, a foundation structure, as the pyramids are.
yeah.
And nobody pays.
No one pays any attention to that. You're just walking over them. But these rocks can be 12 feet by 12 feet with no breaks.
Sometimes 8, 9 feet, sometimes 5, 6 feet. You saw them standing next to them, so you
But,
they
but
were
that looked like
about.
there were 3 layers, or there were more
Well, they're
layers?
probably more underneath.
More.
That's just what's exposed on one side. That's only a little area that's exposed on the side.
Yeah. Yeah, there's actually more digging to do there. It's not all dug up. But yeah, that's the technical prowess was amazing. The base of that pyramid, the Great Pyramid by itself, the base covers 13 acres. 13 acres. All 4 sides are the same length. Not quite. They're off by 56 millimeters on one side. That's the biggest difference. 56 millimeters, that's less than just over half a centimeter. Right? You put in 2,350,000 rocks, you've got a 13-acre base, and the very top of your pyramid, on this pyramid, they didn't quite get it right on center. It's off by 1/4 of 1 inch. And that's possibly happened just from 10,000 years of living. It probably was perfect at one time. Maybe not. You know. But and the sheathing. You imagine every single rock was its own shape, and somehow they sheathed limestone across that so perfectly that they didn't need any mortar on it. And it didn't fall down. It didn't fall down until it was removed in the 14th century. I mean, the technical, now I have a theory. You want my theory? I have absolutely no knowledge other than my scientific study. No one's ever told me this is what the theory is. But let's say that you understand this vibratory world enough that you can pick rocks up and put them down. Our crystals get hot. When we had 64 of those crystals, there was a grand heat coming off of those. Now let's say you pick up a rock and you put it down and you want the rock on top of it to match it perfectly. If you could soften the rock, just soften the outer edges, put that rock on top, just like the line that I showed you guys, there wasn't a line there. If you made them soft, which you could do if you were working with the vibrational frequency, just put it down. It's perfect. It doesn't have to be the same size. It'll perfectly match both rocks. And a lot of them have this with the little corner and all that. That would be a great way to do it. Just soften it up, plop it down, walk away. Yes?
That's the same way they did it in South America, the way things sort of flowed together. You know,
It's all over the world.
extraterrestrials could have done.
Yeah, it's all over the world. So it was definitely a technology. Yes?
Just wondering what your thoughts were about Coral Castle?
Oh, fascinated by Coral Castle. We have to go see Coral Castle. Coral Castle is in Florida. And it was put together by a little guy that weighed about 100 pounds soaking wet. He was about 4'11". And he was in love with a lady, and so he bought some land in Florida to woo his woman to him. And he knew the secret of controlling gravity. And he had rocks that were in excess of 3 and 4 tons. He built arches in the style of the one that we saw the Sphinx through, you know, with the 2 pillars and the headstone and all this stuff. Now, and he did it by himself. He wouldn't let anybody watch him while he was doing this. And he's a tiny little dude, right? And so at one point he moved. He was going to move his, and it's called the Coral Castle. So at one time he was going to move his Coral Castle down the road, maybe 3 miles or something. And so he hired a flatbed truck. And he told the driver, just park the truck right here, go to lunch, come back in an hour, right? And the truck driver's going, yeah, right, right? So the truck driver is actually curious. And he takes off. He comes back in 30 minutes because he wants to see how this guy's doing it, right? He gets back in 30 minutes, and this guy has the entire truck loaded full of 3 and 5 ton rocks in 30 minutes. Now, he went to the grave with his knowledge. But some of the things that he said about it is so obvious that I'm not going to insult you by telling you how it's done. All right, so there is a way to do this. We can do this too. He was modern day. He just died a few years ago. He was modern day. You can go down to Florida and look at the Coral Castle anytime.
He used to live on sardines, they said, mostly.
He was a tiny little guy.
I was there, and I'll just add to what Annabelle said. He has a device there that's kind of rusted. There's a little machine room you can go in and look, and it looks just like one of the John Searle machines. It looks like he had, yes, he had a number of gears, and I know he was working with something like electrogravitics or some type of magnetism that created some kind of perpetual motion and a vortex of some sort. And you can go and look at it. There's also DVDs and stuff you can buy online and read about it. There are some people who've made this theory as well, that he created an electrogravitic or an anti-gravity type of device that he could funnel and shoot that energy at and could make things weightless.
Wow, that's great. And he did not get his girl.
Do you have time to tell us
About Area 51? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay, that was fun.
I just want to point out to you, if you haven't really zoomed in on this, do you have a zoomed up picture of this?
I don't.
Can you all see what this is? No. You might want to come up and look more closely.
We'll just leave it up there for, yeah.
Yeah, she's going to leave it up there. You got to come up and look at it.
Yeah, it's-
Before you get up while she's talking about Area 51.
All I know is I see a body in the rocks.
Yeah.
You see a body in the
Yeah.
box?
You can see the face and then the torso.
You want to come up and point it out?
You want to point it out?
Sure. Here's the face. Eye.
Oh, wow.
Body coming down this way, arms.
Oh, that's cool. I like that.
It's one of those, you see patterns and things.
Well, take a good look while you're here. and
That
see
looks
what
like
you-
a delta.
Come take a
Come look at it.
Kay, you should come up and look at this.
All right, so who wants to hear about Area 51? Anyone? Okay. So I lived in the desert in California, and I was a truck driver, and I was hired by a company that hauled powdered goods. And we hauled powdered cement out of Lucerne Valley, which is a cement limestone type of place, and we took it out. And Area 51 was in Mercury, Nevada, and they hired our company to bring in 5 truckloads of cement every day for about 6 months. That's a lot of cement. Every truck carries 56,000 pounds of cement on it. So anyway, you get to the military installation, you have to pass the protesters. And it was very nice that they had outhouses there for the protesters. It was very nice. And then you get to the gate, and while you're inside where they have their pictures of all their nuclear explosions that they've done there, very proudly displayed on the walls, and you're filling out the paperwork, they have their dogs literally going through your truck, which is where you live. You have a sleeper, your stuff's in there, that's your home. They're taking their dog through it. They have mirrors. They're going under the bottom of your truck to see if they can see if you're bringing contraband in. All right, so you've gone probably 60 miles to get to that gate from the last time you saw civilization. You get through the gate. You're on a 2-lane road with soft sand on both sides. You're in a 60-foot truck. You're not going to turn around. You go in a straight line on that paved road for another 60 miles, where you reach a gate, like Blazing Saddles, right? With the guys going through right, and their horses, and they have the gate, and they have to put a dime in to get through. It's like, are you kidding me? Right? So, at the gate, there's a little 4x4 guard shack right there, where there is a guard. And you pull up, and you get out of your truck, you leave it there. And you go into a little trailer over here, like a 12-foot trailer. There's an air conditioner in it and a water cooler that does not cool the water. And it's like 120 degrees. And you sit in that trailer. Somebody comes from the other side of the gate in a pickup truck, and they take your truck. And they're gone for about 4 hours. And when you get your truck back, it's got 120 miles on it. So they've gone another 60 miles. 120 miles from the entrance gate is where Area 51 actually is. Now, I really liked being there because I felt close to the ETs. I felt like I was hopefully helping. I don't know what they were building. I don't know what they were doing in there. But every time my truck came back, I was hoping I'd have a little hitchhiker. Maybe I could get them out of there, you know? I always looked in my sleeper to see if anyone was back there. Never had one that I know of, but hopefully I got a few out of there. I was offered a job there because I showed up all the time in these trucks, and they said, we need help being one of the guys on the other side of the gate, right, driving the truck in and unloading it. They lived in Las Vegas, and the government had a jet that flew them to work every morning, and they worked, and then they flew them home again at night. And they made a ton of money. And it was sort of the money was tempting, and the lifestyle was kind of romantic, you know, flying to Las Vegas every day, you know. But I just thought about what I thought they were probably doing in there. And I didn't want, I thought they were not being kind to anyone that they may have in there. And I didn't want to be part of that machinery. And so I had gotten close enough to being part of that machinery, just delivering the cement.
Explain how much cement got delivered.
Yeah, 5 times 56,000 pounds every day for 6 months. They were building something back there. They were building something. And us truck drivers, we would always go, what do you think they're doing in there anyway? But underground bunkers.
Semis full every day. So this was not made concrete. These were the bags you make concrete.
Yeah, these were the dry powder stuff.
A full semi, 5 of them, every day.
Yeah. So it was a big project, whatever they were building there. Oh, you know where this guy knows where that jet is that shoots the people up there to work at Area 51.
I went to school with a guy that while he was in New York.
Yes, ma'am.
So you think they have aliens in prison there?
Yes, I absolutely believe they have aliens imprisoned there. I'm quite sure that they're doing experiments on them. And I don't think that they're being very nice. I do believe that there have been alien crashes and that they have recovered alien bodies. And I don't think that they're kind to them. And but I don't have, I'm sure you guys have seen more evidence than I have with regards to all of this. This is just my gut feeling. I know when I was sitting in that trailer for 4 hours a day, I prayed and prayed and prayed. And I say it lightly that I was hoping that one would be in my sleeper one day. And I know that every time I opened that sleeper door, I was half eager and half scared. But at the same time, I just hoped that I was being helpful, but I didn't know what else to do. So that was, but yeah.
How long ago was that you were taking all that cement?
It was in the 90s. So, yeah, late 90s. Yes?
How long have you been pursuing these thoughts in general about the universe?
Ever since I've been an adult.
What got you going?
My dad is a hypnotist and a long-distance healer. His uncle, back then in the 20s and 30s, was a psychic researcher and a minister.
What their name?
The uncle was Edward C. Wood, and he has 2 books out. And my dad was Wister Wood. Morris Wister Wood, that's got a little ring to it here in Philadelphia. But so I witnessed distance healing, I witnessed energy healing. I've been careful not to call it faith healing. We in the home called it faith healing because it was through my father's faith that the healing took place and the person that he was working on. But I knew that people were healing in his presence without medicine. So I knew that the mind was able to alter the physical reality. And I've been after that, researching that in various different ways all my life.
This universe, come to that door, turn around, walk away, turn around, do a U-turn, pick up the time a little bit and stop.
Say that again?
I said, most people in this world, most of the general egos in this world pick up a tiny little tad of that and play with it or do nothing with it and walk away.
No, I'm a bulldog on this one. I really am. Yes.
Do you think the mind actually has the power to make the change, or do you think the mind has the ability to access a higher outside?
Easy one for me. I believe that our minds are they send out and receive. Thank you, transmitters. They send out and receive energy and information, and we have intention. I don't believe of ourselves we have any power whatsoever. I don't think the brain does much of anything but receive and send out. We can use it to focus our heart. I consider the heart actually the power plant of how all of this takes place. And the heart is like the tuner on the brain, which is the radio. Right? And the power is out here.
Does the seed connect in with the heart math people?
Oh, totally.
Yeah. So you might want to mention the heart math.
Yeah, if you're interested in that kind of connection and coherence, heartmath.com is really into coherence and being able to get the mind-heart connection going. Heartmath.com.
I've heard that there's been studies of, I wish I knew the gentleman's name, went to the pyramids, was inside, he had terrible like arthritis and back pain and stuff. He spent some time in the pyramids and studying the figures and all that. When he came out, he was healed. He had no pain. There's some kind of healing quality within those walls.
I would believe that. I haven't heard that particular story, but I certainly wouldn't say no.
Can that be replicated out here anywhere?
I think that our belief in it is really important in the healing thing. I think that's one reason why people healed so readily in Jesus' presence, because he knew what he knew, and no one was going to throw him off center. So when he approached you, he stood in truth. And people, when they're standing next to someone who's really standing in truth, can do incredible things for themselves. And that's what happened in Jesus' presence. Because he was such a powerful presence himself, those that came within his aura could do amazing things for themselves.
It's resonance.
It's resonance. It's exactly resonance. Yes?
So, not that we can price like at this moment, but are you a proponent of tuning forks and using sound for harmonic healing?
Yes, I completely believe in sound bath therapy. One of my best friends has a beautiful sound bath studio set up in Montgomeryville. Attuned with Spirit is her name. If you have physical ailments, headaches that don't go away, achy joints, all of these kinds of things, her sound healing is absolutely amazing. Attuned with Spirit. And her name is Sharon. Not anymore. Sit's gone. Yeah. Yes?
Could you comment on the relationship of this field of study and the shift from 3D to 5D consciousness, or the evolution of consciousness?
Really interesting things are happening in the body right now with new kids coming in. There's a lot going on. One of the things that they're finding is these crystal kids, the indigos and all of them, some of them actually have 3-stranded DNA, which is really powerful work. It's interesting that 5G is coming in the electronic field at the same time that our own consciousness is expanding. But I think what's more important than all of that is for us to learn how to use the consciousness that we currently have. Because it's already powerful enough to create an entirely new reality if we train ourselves to do that. We don't need 5G consciousness. We don't need anything more than we already have, other than the interest to provide the self-discipline to make a difference. So with our electronic equipment, we need the 5G or something to go faster and faster and whatever. With this equipment, we don't need that. We've already got it. We just forgot how to use it. And it's time for us to learn how to use it again. So, more questions? Yes.
Do you think, we have a lot of noise, a lot of noise around us all the time. And does that interfere with, I mean, like, besides being irritating, I mean, everything's so loud. I mean, like, when you go anywhere, like, even in the mall, it's bad enough they got, like, music blaring, then they have TVs on, too. I mean, like, we have so many distractions.
I was just going to say, that's what it is. It's all distractions. And there are at least two ways to deal with distractions. One is to get distracted, right? The other way, however, is to use it to focus in on your intention. So Ram Dass was very clear on this. He said anybody can meditate on a pillow in a silent room, but to meditate on an Indian bus with a goat sitting next to you is a little more difficult. So how good are you, right? And our society is continually getting noisier and noisier. Going into doctors' offices, and they have this TV playing where they convince you that you have all these other illnesses that you've never even heard of, right? So you really have to stay personal. You have to stay focused on what's important to you. And if you treat this as an opportunity to learn to tune all of that out and tune into here. One of the first lessons in unified physics is called infinity within a finite boundary. So go with me on a mental exercise. Have a circle, put a triangle in that circle, put a circle within the triangle, put a triangle in that circle. How far down can you go before you can't do it anymore? Never, ever. And yet, do you ever go outside your original circle? You don't. So infinity is actually within. It's not without. And we keep looking outside for infinity. We think infinity is really big. It's not. It's inside. And it's inside every single one of us. We are truly infinite beings. The kingdom of heaven is within us in that infinity within this finite boundary. And it's everywhere. Cell phones could only be telephones until they figured this out. And they made an antenna that had every different length on it. And when they finally did that, you notice that when the smartphone came in, the antenna was gone. And that's why. They found infinity within a finite boundary. And they took that antenna. Every function on your smartphone requires an antenna of a different length. So they couldn't do that while they had an antenna outside. They put it inside and they gave it an infinite number of lengths going in. So it's important. It's an important distinction to understand infinity within a finite boundary.
Sorry, I have so many questions.
No.
Can water, I've seen that water takes on a chemical, a thought process. Can water play a role in what your goal is?
Water can play a role tremendously. Water is life itself. Water carries the blueprint for DNA inside the water droplet. All life does come originally from water. All of that is true. Any planet that has liquid water can support life as we know it. Almost every star has a planet in the Goldilocks. Goldilocks meaning liquid water zone. It ends up that the possibility for life outside our Earth in the universe is not only really big, but it's like billions and billions of stars have planets that have liquid water on them, and liquid water carries the DNA of carbon-based humanoid life. So to think that we could possibly be alone is just silly.
Have you ever heard of the idea that the human race is supposed to be going to ascension?
I've heard a lot about that.
It's like what you were talking about, infinity's inside of us.
Infinity is inside of us. So to say that we're going to ascension implies that we're not there. Now, we're already at a place where we have choice. We haven't been choosing very wisely. But we're at a choice where we can manifest the physical world of anything that we choose to. And this is what we've manifested. I don't think that we have an ascension to do. We need to learn that we're already ascended beings. We need to understand the power that we already have and start making better decisions. And that's how I feel about that. Oops. I get so passionate, I'm sorry.
Going back to the point of things changing in the world, I've noticed on occasion in the past several months where things that used to sound like chaotic sounds, like say horns blaring on the street or some kind of strange louder than white noise sound, and it sounds like a choir. Whereas, I mean, like marked where I would stop and think that I was hearing a faint radio spread, and then it would turn out just to be this a different way of hearing these sounds. Have you ever heard of that? Or
No, but I wish I knew it, because I'm finding that I'm really annoyed by the sounds of my power tools anymore. And it's like, I hate it when I have to use a saw. And I used to love using the saw, right? So it's really awkward for me. Or using my impact gun, when it reaches proper tension, it makes like a machine gun noise. Terribly unpleasant. And I used to think it was so cool. So it's interesting to me. The deeper I get into this science, the less I'm enamored with my power tools.
You have good tools. Tuning fork.
Get a tuning fork, yeah.
We'll take a few more.
Okay.
I was just wondering if you ever read the Gospel of Judas.
I have not read the Gospel of Judas.
You should read it because it goes back to what you were talking about, where Jesus is telling Judas that he's the only one who can possibly understand even a little of what he's trying to tell people. And it's very mystical.
It sounds really cool.
It's
Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah, I understand
it's a
that.
Gnostic gospel,
Okay.
which was thrown
Yeah, I
out
love
of
the
Bible.
Gnostic Gospels, yeah.
It was about 22 books.
Okay, I think we're pretty much done here.
What made you get into science?
Thank you. I'll be happy to answer that. Thank you.
So thank